Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone you are in. Good that time zone to you. My name is Jitesh Vijayan. I am a postdoctoral fellow at University of Nebraska Lincoln, along with Laura Klasek. I've pulled this meeting to get this workshop together, and as the title says, how do we write better abstracts specifically for workshops? Again, this is a prelude to the PB 2022 meeting that's to be held at Portland, and I'm hoping, wishing him that you all will be there in July. Okay, so as always, okay, the pointer has to have confusions, right? Okay, so here are some deadlines for you guys to keep in mind. The abstract to be considered for a talk in one of the concurrent sessions has to be submitted on or before 11th of March, and that is before 11:59 EST time zone, okay? And then 22nd of June will be the deadline if you want to participate and have a poster presented, and the further details can be found in the website of the conference. Okay, before we go into the actual conference, here are some ground rules and some housekeeping. Housekeeping being that when the panelists are speaking, we would really like if you have your audio mute. Keep yourself muted so that there's no back, feedback and stuff like that. Again, be collegial, and if any discussion should be taken in a good faith forward, and if not, the entire thing falls apart, right? And so there are some code of conduct which ASPB has crystallized, and it's also available on the website. No discrimination. Any sexual advances, either in the chat or otherwise, will not be entertained. Any form of bullying, no. Hateful speech or speech meant to hurt anybody, or intimidations or any other kinds of harassment will not be entertained. If you see something, say something, you can contact one of the panelists and we will take the appropriate actions. So, from here on, Laura will take it forward.
Shinhan has his hand up.
I just want to make sure this is recorded.
It is.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so I'll take over a bit from here. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering over the next hour. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to our wonderful panelists. And then we're going to start with a brief discussion among the panelists about what we see and what makes a good abstract, and point you towards some accumulated do's and don'ts. And then after we set that up, we'll split out into breakout rooms. And there will hopefully be one of the panelists with however many people are in a breakout room. And we have some example abstracts that include some flaws and some things that are good about them that we're going to critically read and discuss to sort of see where they're succeeding and they're not succeeding, based on how we've sort of grounded what makes a good abstract. Then we'll come back, share what we learned. Jitesh just popped the link to the example workshops in the do's and don'ts list into the chat. And then we'll wrap up however much time we have left with the Q&A with the panelists. So then if Shoshana, could you scoot to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so we're not going to cover everything today, but these are a bunch of really great references for you. They are, some of them are ASPB materials, some of them are from Nature, about how the components of an abstract and how to structure them. So we encourage you to check those out because they're quite great in your own time. And then our panelists. So today we're really excited to have Wayne, Jennifer, Shinhan, Miguel with Jitesh and I. So Wayne, Jennifer, Shinhan, and Jitesh right now are on the program committee, which helps plan the meeting. And then Miguel is on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which helps make sure that we're achieving all of the things that we set out to do. And they're all awesome, excellent scientists who have experience with pulling conferences together. So they're gonna help us discuss what makes a good abstract. All right. So I think this is where we have our first brief panel discussion. So I'm going to kind of go in the order that you guys are on my screen and give you guys a couple of minutes to just talk about what you think makes a good abstract. And Shinhan, that means you are the first sacrificial victim there.
All right. Well, I will keep it short. So we do develop a do's and don't document, which you will see shortly. I would say a good abstract is something that is well organized. To me, that's probably the number one thing I would say. The rest of it is not as essential, but to me, even the bad language is not a problem. Okay, so but the organization must be there so to help people understand what you're trying to say. So that I will pass it on to the next colleague.
Wayne, what about you?
For me, a good abstract is one that was written assuming I really have no idea what you do, but after reading your abstract, I know what you've done, why you've done it, and why it's important.
Yeah. Miguel?
Yes, so I definitely agree with both my colleagues on the panel. And I would add that for me, it starts with a good title. I think to me, I'm the type of person who likes to be engaged by what exactly is the topic of the research that you want to propose or that you want to present. And a good title can make or break an abstract, right? Because that's the first thing I read, and that's already your introduction to who you are, how you express yourself, and how you introduce your research. So I would say, in addition to what others have mentioned, the title is a critical thing. So I'm glad to hear that someone is going to have a workshop on how to write good titles, because it's not trivial. Yeah.
Jen?
Well, just to add to all the great ideas that have come through, I would say it's really important to know your audience, depending on who you're speaking to. Is it a group of plant biologists? Is it a broader audience? Is it the general public? You need to know that so that you're pitching the abstract in a way that best fits that audience. So I always try to keep that in mind, because if you want to make your research accessible, you need to pitch it to the right group of people.
Jitesh?
Yeah, you're asking me, or?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Okay, so I would say, again, as Wayne said, assume that I am a biologist and I don't know anything. And for conference, I have 2-3 minutes to read. And in that time, can you tell me that, yes, there is work, there is new information over here that you should be selected to give a talk? Then I will find a way to include you and push for you, not for you, for your abstract to go forward. Yeah. Laura, let me throw the question back to you. What's a good abstract for you?
Well, it's pretty much everything that everybody's already said, but I guess I'll put it in my own words. A good abstract to me is something where I can see, okay, what big problem were you addressing, and then what specific question were you tackling, and can I logically follow the steps that you took, even if I'm not going to really understand them because they're outside my science area. And then when I get to the end, have you explained to me like what part of the question that you started out with that you've answered? If I can see what you're talking about and then see how you got there, that makes it really exciting for me to read your abstract, and that makes me want to advocate for that science so that other people can experience it at the plant biology meeting. All right. So that, I think we have our next prompt question are some common and uncommon missteps. Is this another go around, or should we jump to the do's and don'ts list?
Either way should be fine. So let's jump to the list because we already have that. Just give me 1 second as I pull that up.
I did want to say there was a question in the chat box on
Thank you,
the
Sharon.
previous question.
Mhm.
Do those also apply to the manuscript abstract? And I don't know if Lily wants to expand on her question.
So we'll take this one question for now because, Lee has pulled forward, but the idea is that towards the end 10 minutes, we will open it up for all the questions.
Oh, okay,
But yes,
sorry.
yeah, that's okay. We should have clarified that, but since Lee has already asked that and we spoke about it, I think if one of the panelists would weigh in, that'd be good. So Jen, do you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Wayne, yeah.
So having been a journal editor for many years, I'll say yes, it matters as much for a journal abstract as it does for a talk abstract.
But one thing that I will also add is that if it's for an journal article, the editor still has the ability to go and read the entire manuscript, but we don't. We have to make the call based on what you've written. Just keep that in the back of your mind when you write the abstract. Okay, so here are some do's and don'ts.
You are not sharing it yet. You are still showing the PowerPoint.
Okay, let me quickly. How about now? Is it?
I'm not seeing it. I don't know if other people are.
Okay. Hold on. Let me unshare and reshare again.
The joys of the technology.
Yeah, it just. Okay. Now. Okay.
Yep, you're gonna need to make it bigger.
Yes. Okay, so is that clearly visible?
That'll work.
Okay, since Shinhan was the one who, got the list and got it going, I think we should start with Shinhan, and you can point out some things that, are not obvious, but then, those are big problems for us.
Yeah, so, well, actually, this is from all the committee member. I just started something, and thank you for filling it out. And so, for me, as I mentioned earlier, I think having a clear organization is really, really important. And so Laura has pointed out that three resources. One of them is the Nature Summary document. It's an excellent example of how that organization might look like. And that would be amazing if you can follow that. But that's one form. There's many other ways potentially you can do that if you can achieve the goal of pointing out all the important stuff. And the don't side is a lot of times it's not clear just how component and abstract are connected. So sometimes we see very long abstract, but it's not. It's like every 2 or 3 sentences are its own unit, and then not clear what is connecting with one another. Okay.
Jenny?
I think it's really important to put your work in a broader context. So you don't want to finish the abstract with just the results. You want to say something else about how it's more broadly significant, because that helps people understand in general why you did the work and what future applications could be. And I think that's something that that can be missed, but it makes your work that much more compelling.
So Miguel.
Yeah, and my committee reviews tons of abstracts every year because we review the applications that are submitted for travel grants, and we get to review and read a lot of abstracts every year. So not only from faculty submissions, but postdocs, graduate students, undergraduates. So there's a variety of mistakes that I pick up there, and one of the big ones to me is too much details on the results. So too much detail on the materials and methods. But you spend a lot describing the experimental characteristics, the time points that you measured, a lot of detail, and you use half of the abstract just to describe a lot of things that sometimes are very technical and not very useful for for the audience to actually understand what exactly you did. So I would say diminish that and focus more on the results and the impact of the work. Right. So that's an area that I cannot stress that enough.
Wayne.
For me, the worst part you can do in an abstract is to not finish it and simply say results will be discussed. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a program committee member, we're going to wake up on March the 12th and we're going to have about 1,000 abstracts. And we have to go through those and select 150 of them. And, so just think of yourself, if you're trying to select 150 out of 1,000, you want to know how it's going to fit in the session. You want to know who's going to be interested in it. So you really need to know what the results are and why they're important. And if you just say results will be discussed, we have absolutely no way to judge if the abstract is going to be suitable or not.
Laura?
So I think the one that I'll highlight here is this be concise and specific. And it's also going to go a little bit into this one. So scientific writing is such a peculiar art in that we do have to be so concise and specific. And it's really worth putting a lot of time into what each sentence says to make sure that it is as clear as possible to me, because I'm going to have, I am no longer, in the past, I'm going to have 3 minutes to read through and understand exactly what you're talking about. So there, it's really worth putting the effort into your writing. But don't stress out. I mean, obviously check your spelling and grammar. Don't leave blatant errors that Microsoft Word could have told you about, but don't stress out about the linguistics if you're not a native English speaker. Your great writing will come through some phrasing that might sound a little odd to a native English speaker. But if you are concise and you are specific and you are able to convey your message, that will come across.
So one point that I would like to make is that, so this is something that I've learned from my postdoc advisor. Don't make me interpret your results. Tell me concisely what is your result. Yes, you can tell me this interacts with that, all that, but then if you give me like 10 minutes, yes, I can make the sense of that. But then if I only have 3 minutes for abstract and then I have X number of abstracts, I would like if you tell me, okay, this is the thrust. A interacts with B, that means XYZ happens. That final biology is important for me to understand. So that's my, don't miss it out, don't leave it out for us to interpret it for you. Okay. So this, while we are here, all these resource material will be sent to you after the meeting, and will also be posted on some platform that's associated with the meeting. So you can always go back and take a look at this when you're writing your abstract for the conference. So, anything else that we missed that should be mentioned?
Yeah, Jitesh, I don't think something that didn't see in the do's and don'ts, but definitely once you're done with your draft of the abstract, share it with someone for feedback. Have someone read it, someone who's not as familiar with your research. Don't just submit it thinking that it's great, because most likely they're going to find some mistakes, some clarifications, some things that could improve it. So definitely getting feedback from another student or your faculty advisor or someone who knows a little bit about science but is not related to your research, I would say that that's, to me, critical as well. The same way that you don't submit a paper without having it proofread and reviewed by others, you probably shouldn't submit your abstract without having received some feedback and have it, at least someone else check it.
Along the same lines, I'll also add another thing. Don't always assume that only a PI Of course, PIs can do a good job, but sometimes I found that senior undergrads or junior undergrads can catch certain things that a PI misses because they are in the field, they know the field, they assume something. But then a senior undergrad who is smart, or a junior undergrad, just for that matter, can actually catch some mistakes or some miss in the flow. So if you have somebody like that around, have them read it once. That's also really good, a resource for you. Okay, so now let us get into the breakout rooms. But before we go, let me just mention to you how we have set this up. So one group is going to be in the main room because we need a recording, and unfortunately Zoom doesn't record all the breakout rooms. So and the group that is assigned with Wayne Parrott is going to be in the main room. The rest all will have a room specific assigned to you randomly by Shoshana, and you'll go in, and in the Google Doc that we have given you, there are 3 abstracts of the same story with different kinds of mistakes. Read it into 3 minutes or so, and then critique it as if you are wearing our cap, as if you are the reviewer. And then, of course, the panelists are going to help you do that more deliberately, and then make points of all of them. Once you're done, we are going to have about 15 minutes, I would say, because with very few participants over here, I think 15 minutes should be sufficient. We'll come back. At that point, each group will tell us one thing that they learned, and we'll go in rounds, and then we will discuss about those mistakes. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Okay, Laura has put in the Google Docs link. So I think we are ready to join the breakout rooms. See you after the breakout session.
Yep, see you in about 15 minutes.
So hello, everyone. How are you? So I think for those of us in this breakout, could you just turn on your camera if possible and introduce yourselves, please, so that we know who we are? Hi, Laura. Do you want to begin by introducing yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Pereira. I work at UC Davis with Doug Cook, and I'm a graduate student.
And can you turn on your camera so that we're...
Yeah, I think right now it's on.
Yes, thank you so much. Solen?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Solen Moulin. I'm a postdoc in Stanford, working with LMA.
Hey, and Christopher. Do you have a camera? Yes, a face. Faces are awesome.
So do you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm a PhD student from the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico, Barranquitas campus. And I'm also very interested on knowing how to be better at writing abstract.
So I have shared my screen, and I think you can see it says Abstract A and Abstract B. I will give you a couple minutes to read them, and then I will put on Abstract C on so you can see it. And then I'm going to ask you, if you know, which of these is the most helpful, if you have, let's again, pretend you're in the program committee and you have to pick an abstract to invite them to present in public, which of these abstracts is going to be the most helpful in your decision? So begin with abstract A. When you're done, go to abstract B. And if you guys are ready, I'm going to go on to abstract C. So I'll begin in the same order in that you introduced yourselves with. So Laura, which of these do you find the most helpful and why?
Yes, it sounds better, the abstract C, because I don't have to look for the meaning of the acronyms. I mean, it's more clear and it doesn't spend too much time in details that I'm not going to remember when I'm reading fast.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And there's actually, it does more than just that. So, so then if you compare abstract C with abstract B, what's the, what issues do you find with abstract B?
Abstract B indeed go into technical details that might not be relevant for just understanding what is the science behind it. And apart from that, it also goes uses terms that I don't know, for example, chlorosis. I guess it's more clear in the other one. It's easier to understand.
Yeah, and what about Christopher? What's your thoughts on on abstract B versus abstract C?
For me, I would choose also the abstract C because I feel it more concise and specific. Like was very easy to understand what they were doing and what were their findings. So yeah, also the abstract B doesn't show the acronym's significance. So if there's a person that doesn't know what is the meaning of those acronyms, they will get a better loose.
So the other thing too is that, again, we kind of judge people by how much care they pay attention to details. So if you notice in abstract B, Microsoft is underlining mistakes, and you really shouldn't start a sentence with a number. And the fact that they ignored Microsoft corrections is sort of a red flag for us. You know, can we trust them to give a good talk if they're not paying attention to details like this? So who wants to talk about abstract A?
I guess I can go ahead. Abstract head really have a no-go in terms of like not presenting any results. They just like give a bit of technique, like the background is okay, and then they say what they aim at and their method, which is one more time a bit too detailed because it's not that relevant. And then they just stop it by saying the result will be presented, but there's no interest in there, and there's just no further context in what's the relevance of their study for other people.
Correct. And if we're trying to plan a program, we don't even know if they're going to have results worth presenting or anything like that. So good. So let's just dissect abstract C a little bit and into the parts of it. So so the first part, you have to have a little bit of background, right? So, and this is really you're setting up the problem. You're studying a problem, and then you sort of explain what the issue is. You set up the question that you're trying to ask. And then what's the next part?
Methods.
What's that? The methods. And again, you provide just enough methods so that we kind of get a big picture of what you did, but we don't need to know the details at this particular stage. And then the third part is this part here. You have to know, which is, Christopher, what would you call this?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah, so the abstract started by giving us a little bit of background and defining the problem that you're trying to solve. Then it's going to tell us how you try to find out the answer. And then what's the third part?
The results.
Absolutely, what you found. Now, the issue is that I am not a physiologist. And quite frankly, when people are reviewing your abstracts, it's not always possible to have an expert on every topic be the reviewer. So your abstracts are in all likelihood going to be reviewed by people who might know the field but do not know the specific terms. So that is what makes the last part so important. So what's this last part?
The conclusions, like what is the meaning in a general, for a general audience?
Correct. You absolutely need to tell us why it's important. Yeah, that's what Jitesh was saying earlier, that you need to tell me the interpretation. Do not leave the interpretation up to me. So if we have these four basic parts in an abstract, then we can actually get a very good idea of what your work is, why you did it, what you found, and why we should choose it for an invited talk. So does this make any sense?
Right.
So what other thoughts and ideas do you have on abstracts?
I think sometimes the issue is thinking on your research from a broad perspective, like taking that a step backwards and looking it with a more general view. I think sometimes that can be the problem because you are so into the specific methods and all the things that you are trying to find, but then giving the big picture based on your conclusions will be a little bit difficult when you are with work in progress. It's something that still you are not having the whole results ready unless you are presenting something that was totally finished and then you are done with that project.
No, you're correct. And, you know, in general, the trap that everybody falls into is you kind of assume that all the readers know as much information as you do, when that's never the case. So, you understand it because you have all the background information in your brain, but none of us do. And the problem is that if you ask your major professor or if you ask another graduate student in the lab, can you please review this for me? They also know everything that you know. So they're not going to catch it. But if you go to a different lab that studies something different and they don't have all the background information in their heads, they're going to say, oh, this does not make sense, or this needs to be explained a little bit better. So again, it's about avoiding or remembering that the purpose of the abstract is not to inform you, it's not to satisfy you, it's to inform somebody that has no idea what you're doing. Any other thoughts? So Lynn, you've been very quiet now.
I think we've said much of it. I was like wondering as well, like it's always putting a threshold between what is general knowledge and what is like expert knowledge. And
yes, and that is, when Dr. Lewis on the panel said you need to know your audience, that's exactly what she meant, is that if different audience, what's general knowledge in one audience is not general knowledge in another audience. So you really do need to know whom you'll be speaking to and get a feel for what their general knowledge is going to be. If you're at say a general biology conference, a lot of the, anything that's very plant specific is not going to be general knowledge at all. But if you are at a plant conference, more things will be general knowledge. And if you are particularly on a, metabolic physiology, energy, metabolism conference, you can assume that they will know everything. So yeah, you do need to know whom your audience is going to be.
in that sense, the abstract C, for example, got quite a few specialized things, but you would consider it's good enough because in the end it gives like simplified versions that you can still get the take-home message even if you miss some bit in the middle. That's the idea.
That's the idea, correct. And like anything else, abstracts take practice. But the other thing I find that helps me is it's better if they develop over time. If I draft an abstract and then try to correct it immediately, I cannot do it. But if I draft an abstract in the morning and then look at it in the afternoon, I see all sorts of improvements I can make. Or if I wait till the next day, it's even better. And if you start early enough that you can look at your abstract over a period of 2 or 3 days, it gets even better. Christopher, any more thoughts?
Not really, like all the things that you have been and the other people have been saying have been very interesting. And I think that those details for sure could help me to improve when I'm writing the abstracts and other things that I think that this basic can be applied to other types of writing.
And then, again, also sometimes, for example, this process involves downregulation, but a lot of abstracts would say this involves downregulation, and you're reading it and you're thinking, what are they talking about? So always be very, just remember the abstract was not written for you. It was written for someone that doesn't know. So just be sure, that all the parts are clear to someone who doesn't know what you did.
I was thinking it was probably close to time to close the rooms anyway and bring everybody back. Kia, right, Wayne?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I just hit the close, so they'll get a notice that it's going to close in 60 seconds.
Great.
While we're waiting for the rest of the group to join us, I'll ask some of the non-panelists, what's the single most important pointer that you think you learned? Laura?
Right. I think, well, basically revising from a different perspective. Many times is giving more time to think about the conclusions and to make sure you are not missing any of the basic components, and give that time to have revisions and opinions from outside your lab. That's my main take. Actually, that's something I need to work on.
Great. Ash, back to you, sir. And you're muted.
2 years and still this happens, right? Okay, so, well, human being. Okay, so so I'm hoping that you got a much better understanding of not just writing abstract, how we evaluate the abstract, and so on and so forth. So because we have very little time, and it's about 9 minutes, so we'll do one thing is that we'll go to the questions directly. Is that okay? Because we only have 9 minutes now. So we'll skip the round robin of pointing off what the mistakes are. And I'm hoping that you will go look at the do's and don'ts and get used to that idea. Okay, so do the participants have any questions for the panelists? Keep in mind, these panelists are going to be those who read and evaluate your abstracts. Yes, Lee.
So I have a question. It's like sometimes if you submit an abstract to a conference or journal, they have the word limits. I feel like it's hard for me to cut the abstract off to fit their requirement. So I don't know if the panelists have any suggestions to that.
I think you have to really think about what is important for the audience. So you have to be really surgical and thinking about which background do you need to include, how do you concisely explain why you did the experiment, you know, really summarizing those results and then bringing it back to the bigger picture. And it is hard to fit it into the word limits, but because you have to meet that, it really makes you think about, okay, am I including information that somebody needs to know, or is this, you know, some kind of random thing that's not related to what I'm going to talk about in the abstract?
One strategy that I have applied in my abstract writing is that we do the experiment ABC to XYZ, instead starting what is the main thrust of the paper, and then spinning things around that makes it easy. At that point, you can know, okay, I don't need to talk about this in the abstract. This is not the most important thing. This can go out. So spinning, knowing what's that tagline and then spinning around has helped me, but my work is systems biology work, so it's generally helpful that way. Other panelists?
So I just want to echo what my colleague has said. And there is this terminology called backward design. And what you do is you start from the end and ask yourself the question, well, what is my goal? I write this abstract in order to achieve certain goals. This is what I wanted to get. This is my take-home message. They got to get this out of my abstract. And you use that as a guiding principle, and you start testing, I would say.
And I would say the last thing about that is, if you're still struggling, if you still have not been able to narrow down to the number of characters that you need, have someone edit it for you, help you. That would be the last thing, is just have someone you know is really good at editing and just can give you very honest feedback and chop it for you. So, I mean, that would be my last recommendation. If but everything else is failing and you still can't narrow it down, then someone else can help you do it.
Any other inputs?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I just want to add one thing. It's like as Mingo suggested that have somebody editing that for me. Yes, I do have that experience. I feel like I compared my version with his version. Looks like his version is like cut all of the modified words, like, you know, adjective or adverb, something like off, and then that will shrink my abstract. Thank you.
Throw an English major, because I have an undergrad degree in science and English, an English major thing in here. Write with active verbs. So not in passive voice, not was discovered or was observed, or use active verbs. They're shorter and they're more impactful.
Also, you know, there's detail, you know, there's details that you have to know to understand, and there's details that are nice to know, but they really are not necessary to know to understand the message. And there's sometimes a lot of these nice to knows details tend to be added, and they're really not necessary.
Any other questions? Okay, since there's no question, I would like to make one point. Last year was my first year of being on the committee, and before that I had other experiences, right? But one thing that I'll tell you is that just because your abstract did not get selected to give a talk does not mean that your work is not up to mark. Please do not qualify your work with the selection. It just simply means that there is high competition, or there is another person whose work may have scored out of 5, may have scored 4.5, yours scored some 4.0, but then everybody else is also 4.5 scores. So we then obviously are going to give them the chance to talk. but does not mean that your work is any less significant just because it didn't get selected. It just didn't get the cutoff across just in terms of scores, right? So
your competition is extremely strong. Let's put it that way.
Yes. I remember last year for signals, we had 5 of them with 4.5 scores that we had to then, like, say, okay, this person is going to go for 2 minutes talk.
But I do want to point out that you do get chosen. So just write a good abstract and you'll get chosen.
Okay, any other? Oh, yeah, yeah, Lee, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Last question is that, so I feel like the first sentence is probably very important to their abstract or their manuscript. So can you guys give some suggestions to say how I can write, the first sentence, and make their audience, think that's very interesting and make my abstract more attractive? Thank you.
I don't think I can give like really specific advice, but I can tell you how I would try and figure it out for yourself. Like I would look at your 5 favorite papers and their first sentence of the abstract and how they phrased it, because they're going to be in your discipline. They're going to be doing the exact same thing of, all right, how do I talk about this big problem and what piece of it that I'm going to delve into concisely and to pique people's interest.
Also, I'm not exactly sure if that I hold that idea. The first sentence holds, the title holds a bigger weightage for me than the first sentence does. But again, different opinions, right? Okay, so we are on the dot 4. Anything that the panelists want to share with the group before we call it good?
One thing I thought of that I didn't mention when we were talking about do's and don'ts, but it's important to also include your co-authors and your author list when you're submitting your abstract. It shouldn't just be your name. If other people were involved in the work, it's important to acknowledge all of their contributions because our science is collaborative. So we want to make sure that we're giving acknowledgement to people who have contributed to the work.
Yes, please do.
I could say that probably those are the best people that you can send your abstract. They can review and give you feedback too. So.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
I want to say I agree with Patricia, especially for scientific accuracy. But one thing I was trying to point out in my session is that the abstract is not written for you or your co-authors. It's written for people who do not know what you've done. So some things that are not obvious to you are not going to be obvious to your close colleagues. So you need to get somebody that's somewhat removed from it to read it, because they're the ones that tend to catch more things.
Yes. Shinan.
So I just want to add one last thing too. That when I was reading some of the abstracts, and I realized there's one really important principle that is trying to reduce the use of weasel words. The weasel word is things that convey quantitative feeling, but you don't provide a number. So for example, you say many of the plants are dead, but just how many? You never say how many. So this is really important. So I put a link in there for weasel word. Trying to reduce the use as much as you can. Sometimes you cannot not do it, but trying to reduce it.
Okay. Any further questions, suggestions? We are out of time. So, okay, in that case, let's wind this thing down. I hope, honestly, that you got some really important ideas out of this, and you'll go back and critically look at your abstracts. And of course, when you look at other folks' abstracts for those who ask for help, you'll do the same. And I'm hoping this 1 hour spent was useful to you. There's also another hope that we will see most of you in Portland or Savannah 2023. That's from the program committee hoping. Wayne has something.
No, I just wanted to say 2 things. One is I want to thank Jitesh and Laura for taking the initiative to put this together. It's really, really helpful. Jitesh and Laura are the early career representatives on the committee, and having them on board has been a breath of fresh air. They have brought very useful perspectives to the committee. So with that, I want to encourage every one of you when they, to get involved in some committee of ASPB, whether it's the program committee or another one. They send out that questionnaire every year. What committee would you be interested in? By all means, get involved. I think both Laura and Jitesh would tell you it was been a rewarding experience for them.
Yes,
Absolutely.
totally agree. Yeah. Okay. So the recordings will be posted. The resource materials will be sent to you, and it will also be posted in the abstract page as well. So thank you all for joining in. And the panelists, if you could just hold on for like 2 more minutes, that would be awesome. But yeah, thanks to the participants.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.